welcome to today's live session. So I'm going to be doing these wholesaling Q&A sessions every weekday, so Monday through Friday at or around 3:40. If you guys want to send me questions in advance, hit me up in the DM, send me your questions, and we'll go through them. It's going to be very much rapid answer, so we're not going to dive too deep. But if you guys do have any questions or want me to expand on anything, please let me know that in the in your messages as well, and I can do a longer, more deep dive version of these videos and put them up on the YouTube channel. So today, what I'm going to talk about is what I think is a great topic. This is going to be about making good offers. So this comes from a call that I had last night. I had one of my one-on-one calls, which you guys are all invited to, by the way. I have spots available throughout the week. They are limited, but anyone can join. We'll talk for about 45 minutes, and I'll help you out on your wholesaling business and hook you up with answers to any questions you have. What's going on, Taylor? Good to see you, man. So today's question, kind of a multiple part question, but overall we're going to be talking about how to make good offers. So the different parts of this question, and this is why I really wanted to share this, is first of all, how much to offer. We're going to deep dive a little bit more than your standard max allowable offer formula, but specifically the question from this person I had the one-on-one call with yesterday is, if we're talking, you got to make an offer ASAP. It's time sensitive, which, should be. You want to operate always with a sense of urgency. But, assuming maybe you're even standing in front of a seller and they're expecting an offer from you. And then what do you do and how much should you offer if you can't find any good comps? And then finally, the last part of this question is, when you do the math, you come up with your offer, how do you know who to market to? If it makes sense for, let's say, a rehabber, a fix and flip, or, maybe a landlord, someone buying for cash flow, how do you market to those people? Who should you market to? What makes sense? So I kind of want to break this down. And the first thing I want to talk about is how much to offer. Well, if you are talking directly to a motivated seller, and again, they have to be motivated, whether you're standing in front of that person or you're on the phone, doesn't matter. You always want to get them to give you a price first, right? And this is pretty standard. I mean, this is kind of any type of negotiation. I feel like everyone knows this, but what almost inevitably happens, especially to my beginners, is you're in front of this person or you're on the phone with the person and you say, well, how much do you want for this property? And inevitably they're going to say, well, what's your offer? And then, or they're going to say, well, you contacted me, so you take me and you give me your offer. And what happens is a lot of, especially like I said, my newbies, they kind of panic, and then they're like, okay, let me look at the numbers real quick and spit something out, so I'll give you 70,000. But this is where you really have to know how to talk to people. You need to have a script. And when I say script, I don't mean you're reading something like a robot. I mean you have a general idea of what you're going to be saying and how you're communicating with people. A lot of this comes just through volume, through putting in the reps, and a lot of it comes through practice. And I always recommend to my students that they do role play, whether it's someone in your household, whether it's an accountability partner. But worst case, you can stand in front of a mirror and anticipate these objections, and then you'll know how to respond to them. So if someone said something like that to me, well, you make me an offer, the first thing is you never want to be confrontational. So you want to say, oh yeah, not a problem. I just need a little bit more information on the property so I can get you an offer that makes sense. So then what they're going to do is you're going to start talking. You can start asking some questions, try to dig into their motivation a little bit. And the more you talk, and not the more you talk, but the more you get that seller talking is often to the degree it's correlated to how much rapport you're going to start building. And then from there, you can start making assumptions, throwing little things out there. Okay, so let me just ask you, and I know you're not sure about a firm figure, but just a ballpark. You have just a ballpark in mind, so I don't waste your time, just to see what you might be interested in. Again, you might want to explain, like, I'm an investor. Obviously, I'm not. It's not a personal residence. I do have to factor in some costs on my end, and I got to factor in some costs on my end, make my profit, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't buy retail, but I think we can come up with something. I pay cash, close fast. That'll work for both of us. But what's a ballpark figure? You say very nonchalant, and then at that point, usually they can spit out a number. Or if not, there's a path of responses that you can go down, where typically over time you can get them to spit out a number. Or you can start asking some probing questions like, okay, well, do you know what houses in the area sell for? Do you know the tax assessed value? Or if they know what a property is sold for, okay, do you know what type of condition that was in? Things like that, and get them talking just to get an idea. And one of the reasons you want to do that is because oftentimes, if you're just throwing numbers out there, you can easily price yourself out. I had a situation with a student working on a probate deal, and well, I've had a couple different situations, but actually I'll give you more of a hypothetical one here. Let's say that a property is worth 100,000, and you do the numbers so you know that's correct, and you tell the seller, well, I'll give you 75,000. And that's not a bad offer. I mean, obviously depending on your market. But what if you were in a situation, and like I said, I could think of a few of these, but imagine you're in a situation where, maybe this is an inherited property and that person would have been content, maybe they don't know anything about the values, maybe they just had a car in mind they wanted to buy, or they just wanted to get quick cash, and maybe they would have been content taking, $55,000 or $65,000. But then you just effectively cut yourself out of $10,000 or $20,000 because you didn't know how to properly communicate with that person. So that's going to be kind of the first piece of this is you always want the seller to give you that number first. It also helps later down the line when you're negotiating, in terms of leverage, in terms of who wants the property more, things of that nature. So the next part of this question is going to be, well, how much do you offer if you can't find any good comps? And this happens a lot. And so one thing I want to tell you guys is that the comping process is much more of an art than it is a science. Now, there are going to be times, especially if you're in one of these communities where there's, like, let's say a big builder, and basically they're cookie cutter homes, like every home next to each other looks the same. Those are obviously going to be a lot easier to comp. But sometimes you're going to get in there and the comps just simply are not going to be there. The properties might look different. They might not be any recent sales. So in this case, what you have to do is just kind of make your best educated guess. You really don't need to overthink this. I'll explain why in just a second. But you really just, as a wholesaler specifically, it's different if you're like rehabbing the house. But as a wholesaler specifically, you really just want to kind of get in the ballpark of a number that kind of makes sense. So a couple things you can do. First of all, if you're looking for your ideal comps, they're going to be in the same subdivision, they're going to be built around the same year. The construction is going to be very similar, all the similar quality, same subdivision. I think I said that one already. But let's say there are no comps there. Well, then you can slowly start pulling back your criteria. There's nothing in, a quarter mile. Look what's sold in a half a mile. If you can't, you can't find that, maybe you have to go out to a mile. Now, is that perfect? Is that great? No, but it's kind of the next best thing. If you can't find something built, around the same year, same couple of years, you might have to look at the previous decade. And then based on that, you can start to make little assumptions. Like, this property is slightly newer, it's probably worth a little bit more. And that's going to help you out. Now, where are you going to find these comps? I'll get to that in just a second, but there's some really, really good software out there where they're getting these numbers. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the first point I wanted to make is kind of sometimes you have to expand to a place where it's not perfect, but it kind of gets you in the ballpark, and then you make certain assumptions based on, is it a little bit older? Is it wood frame versus a concrete block structure or something like that, right? I'll talk about the software where you can find the comps in just a minute, but let's assume that the place where you can't find the comps is, typically you'll get it from your CRM or some type of software. So let's say they're not there. Well, now you can start looking at other places. I always tell you, like, if you look at Zillow, for example, that Zestimate is often very much off, but you can still find good information on Zillow. You can look at actual sales sold. You can do things like go to the property appraiser website and look at comps in that area from that website. A lot of times they might, again, not be in the in the last 6 months, and then you have to go out to a year. There's nothing for the last year. You might have to go out even further from that. And this is where, like, you kind of knowing your market and having that market knowledge, that's important as well, because look how fast things change. Comps, look at how the market is right now with less inventory, at least, as I'm shooting this video. You'll have to make assumptions that something that sold 2 years ago, there's less inventory right now. You could probably sell it for a little bit higher, right? So that's another place you can look, again, like Zillow and some of these like third-party websites. If you don't have a CRM or a software for your comps, you can also go and look at the property appraiser site. You can just do some Google searching, man. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but this is if you can't, find really, really good comps. That's another thing you can do. After that, let's say you're really, really struggling. Next thing you can do is you can look at active listings that are listed on the MLS. So if you're in a certain area, you can look what are properties selling there for, or asking price, the listing price. Now, is this a good way to comp properties? Absolutely not. I'm more or less talking about, the worst case scenario, but that'll just give you kind of an idea of what the asking prices are, what the properties are going for. You can go and look at the pictures, look at some of the conditions of these properties. Now, in addition to that, something else that you really want to do, and this is what I recommend for all of my students, is that you want to do a quick Google search and search for wholesalers in your market. So you can search, for me, wholesalers in Palm Beach County. Inevitably, some wholesaler websites will come up. And then what you want to do is you want to go to these websites, and there's going to be a box somewhere on that site, and it's going to say, hey, do you want to get my wholesale deals? Pop in your email and I'll send them over to you. And so you want to enter your email as if you were a cash buyer. And I recommend you create a brand new email address for doing this. That way it's not mixed in with all your other stuff. And then what's going to happen, it may not happen the first day, but over time, you want to get on a bunch of wholesalers lists. You'll start to gather intel. You'll see what other wholesalers, what deals they're putting out. You'll see what prices they're asking for, and also over time you'll be able to see you'll be able to see how fast properties go. You'll see maybe one property and it comes back for 3 weeks, and that's going to tell you, well, that was priced way too high. Another property you'll see, maybe the asking price $85,000, it's gone the next day, and then you can assume that wholesaler marked it up a minimum price $10,000, so they probably got it under contract for, what I say, 85. So they got it under contract for 75,000. That can just give you some really good intel on what prices you should be looking to put your properties under contract for. So that's it can work more or less immediately, especially if you're on their webpage and looking at their inventory. But over time, the intel will get a little bit better, help you get more familiar with your market, and it's also a great opportunity to joint venture with other wholesalers, which I'm going to talk about in a minute as well. Next thing I want to talk about is just some software stuff. So, most CRMs these days, they're relatively similar, and they are pulling comps. A lot of these CRMs now are connected to the MLS. So here's where your comps come from, right? Comps, I'm sure you guys probably know this, but that's going to be, properties that have sold, similar properties that have sold. So they come basically from two places. One is going to be the public record, which is, your county, the recorder of deeds when a property is sold. They get that information and they put it in the public record, and anybody can look that up, right? And so the only thing with that is that can be a little bit slower. Also, there's a difference between what we call disclosure states and non-disclosure states. So in disclosure states, which is the majority of states, I'm in Florida, that's a disclosure state. Basically, it's going to be available in the public record. There are, I think it's 12 non-disclosure states. The biggest one is going to be Texas. It's probably where a lot of people are, well, at least people that connect with me, ask me these questions. That's where a lot of you guys are coming from. So in general, you won't be able to see what properties sold for through the public record, but you can see comps if you have access to the MLS. So one option would be to get licensed. I don't recommend it. I'm not licensed. There are benefits to doing so, like access to properties and things like that. That's a whole nother rant. I can go into another video on that. But you can partner with a realtor. You can ask a realtor for comps. Or there's certain types of software where they partner with brokerages, and those guys will essentially get you the comps that you need. My recommended software right now, there's RealFacts, which is, again, a software that allows you to pull comps, but it's also a full functioning CRM. Privy, talk to you guys a bit about that, and I'll be doing some more demos with that. Again, just this relationships with individual brokerages where they can get that information. And Texas, Propelio was started specifically with Texas. I think now they might have expanded to have nationwide MLS comps, whereas if you guys remember earlier this year, PropStream lost some of that data. But those are just some options for you guys as well. And then the last part of this that I kind of wanted to mention is that you just want to, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but you want to just kind of get in the ballpark. And the reason I say that is because, some people really obsess over this, their offer, and this max allowable offer formula. I'm sure everyone here, if you've heard of wholesale and you watch the YouTube video, is familiar with, which is your ARV, your after repaired value, what the house is worth, if it's in good condition, times like 70% minus your profit and minus repairs. And the idea is, so many people have, it's a good starting point, and I do teach that, and I recommend my students learn this as well, and that's something I teach, but it's not the end-all be-all. And if a property doesn't fit that exact criteria, it doesn't mean you can't do the deal, because what that does, and I'm surprised how much it's taught, it's almost a little bit antiquated in the sense that people teach it like, if you don't meet these this criteria, you don't have a deal. And the reality is that formula, one, doesn't take into account current market conditions, right? So, here in Florida right now, I've been able to regularly wholesale things at, 85% of ARV. And the other thing that it kind of negates or ignores is the fact that buyers are different, man. Buyers buy for different reasons. Buyers have different criteria. An example I like to give, right? If a guy has $100,000 in the bank, he's and buying a property, and someone else, he has cash, and someone else is looking to do a deal, but they're using hard money, the person using hard money is paying for application fees, they're paying origination fees, they're paying 4 points on the loan, they're maybe paying up to 14% interest. Their costs are way higher. So the way they analyze the deal might look completely different. There are other things where, some people will not touch a rehab. They won't flip for anything less than a $50,000 profit. And I know people who will flip deals for $20,000 profit, obviously depending on the time frame and the amount of work. But for those two individuals, they have different criteria as to what is acceptable. A lot of that's also going to be based on market conditions. Then you have international buyers. Their countries, again, don't even have FDIC insured banks the same way we do. They just want to take their cash and want to put it into some secure, U.S. real estate. There's some people who are buying as landlords. They want cash flow. They want to hold this property for 50 years. They want to, pass it down to their kids. You have some people who maybe own, 10 properties on a block, and they're willing to pay a premium and pay extra because maybe they don't have proper to the best of my ability. I get under contract. I'm putting specific clauses in my contract. This is why contracting is so important. That's going to say, hey, we're agreeing on this price, but it's more or less contingent on our findings during this inspection, right? So let's say a house is worth, I don't know, 150. I'm offering to pay 100, but that clause is in there. So then when it's time to do the inspection period, let's say I have 10 days to do this. That's when I'm going to have my buyers go. They're going to inspect it because it's based on their numbers. Like I was saying a minute ago, what do they want? How much money do they want to make? And so that's what's important to them. So they're going to go and they're going to do their due diligence. And then they're going to come back to me and say, Mike, I'll take it for, 110, 120. Or they're going to say, that was too high. I can't do it. And then my next question to them is going to be, well, what would you pay? Maybe they'll say, maybe I could do 90. And I'll ask them why, I'll ask them for feedback. I'll go back, regurgitate that to my original seller. Say, listen, I know we said we're going to buy this for 100. We still want to do the, but based on our inspection findings, I just got to get it a little bit lower. A wallet analogy, right? Where I'm not paying more than $50 for a wallet. My sister will buy a Louis Vuitton wallet for some insane price. So you want to get as many eyes in front of it. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have had deals where I ran the numbers and I was like, this is a fucking amazing deal. I'm going to make, 30K on this. And I put it out there and I got no hits. Had to cancel the contract. And then I've had deals where I'm like, I don't really know if these numbers work. I don't know if I want to put it out to my buyers because they might think I'm like full of shit or whatever. And I put it out and inevitably I get some messages, like hate messages, like, dude, you're a fraud. Like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. These numbers don't make sense. And then I've had other people, same property, make an offer. And then another separate buyer make an offer and actually bid against each other. And I ended up selling that property for, not just that property, I've had a lot of situations that happens. And you get into these situations where people will bid over your asking price, you'll make even more. The other important thing is to realize anytime you advertise a property, as long as it's not like you advertise a discounted property. I'm not saying advertise dumb stuff. I get sent garbage all the time. I'm sure anybody in the business knows. You'll get a property that's retail price on the MLS and then they mark it up $10,000, right? So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is if you do have a discounted property and let's say you put an ad up on Facebook or a post on Facebook, that person, someone might give you a call and you guys get to talking and that's how you can build rapport with your buyers. Or they'll say, Mike, this deal, it's $100,000, it's a little bit high. I'll say, okay, well, what do you think you would pay? And that's how you can, again, get back to renegotiating your deal, kind of massaging them until they work. And also, some of these people, they won't necessarily even reach out to you. Sometimes they will. And like I said, when you're building rapport with these buyers, it's much better to treat your buyers like people. Find out their wants, find out their needs. They'll want to work with you. They won't want to cut you out of deals. That's the way you want to run your business, not just treat them like a number on a buyer's list, right? So that's kind of another piece of the puzzle. And then you have some people who will go to your website. They'll kind of I guess, shadow browse you, would be a good term. Maybe they'll sign up for your list. And so maybe you'll hear from them that day. Maybe you won't hear from them till you put another property out 6 months later. And then you get a deal, next thing you know, you make 20K or whatever it is. And the only reason they know you exist is because you put a property out there, or a post, or an ad or listing, whatever, 6 months ago, right? So anytime you're doing that, these things have a compounding effect. So I would say not to limit yourself and worry, about, getting overly over the top with your segmentation in terms of, well, these numbers only work for a rehabber, and these numbers only work for landlord. Again, people have very different criteria for how they look at properties, despite what you might see in on YouTube or the latest I don't know, whatever course or whatever shit people are teaching. All right, so that's that was our question of the day. Like I said, these are going to be kind of rapid fire videos. This one was a little bit longer because there are multiple parts, but if you guys have questions, please do two things. One, shoot them to me over DMs. We're going to be doing this every day, Monday through Friday, at about this time, 3:40 or so. And again, these are meant to be kind of quick answers, so I know there's probably some things that maybe I go over quickly, or you just want fleshed out a little bit more. So if there's any confusion, please send me those questions. I can either address them on the next live, or if it's worthy of doing a deep dive, I will make a longer YouTube video on that. So please do also DM me your questions. Remember, if anybody here wants to jump on a one-on-one call, you will, at this point in time, be talking directly to me. We'll talk for about 45 minutes. I'll look at your business, what you're doing. Like, I have dealt with, I've got tons of students. I have, I've dealt with a lot of different students. I've been in this business for like a decade. I started with no money, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, some people say that, but then you find out, like, oh, yeah, but, my dad gave me, like, 20K to, like, get started. I mean, I started with no money. My first deal, no money. I have a lot of students who started with no money. So, I've had a lot of students throughout the years here who have started with no money. So I can pretty quickly identify, like, where you're kind of messing up and or what you should be doing instead. I'll give you a good idea of what you want to be doing instead. If anybody's interested in mentoring or any programs or anything like that, you can ask me about it. I can explain that on the call for you as well. But the call is free. There's no obligation, anything like that. It's actually where I get a lot of ideas for content, so that's helpful to me as well. So you can, if you're interested in the call, just go to www.wholesalingwithmike.info/call, and you can sign up. The only kind of caveat is that those spaces are limited. I can't be on the phone, just talking all day. So there are a few spots every week, so it's just on a first come, first served basis. So go there if you want to jump on a call with me. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow, same time.